Hello, welcome to today's webinar. I will start by a territorial acknowledgement, and I would like to acknowledge the Lekwangan speaking people on whose territory we stand today. We recognize and respect the First Nations government across this region, the Sangis and the Esquimalt Nation in the core area, the Huasanich Nation out on the Saanich Peninsula and the Gulf Islands, and to the west, the Sianu, the Suk, and the Pachidat, all of whom have a long-standing relationship with the land and the sea, and it continues to these days. I always love to thank the opportunity to work, play, live in this beautiful island and on the Lekwangan speaking people territory. I feel to be really grateful for being the guest here. So my name is Beatrice Frank. I'm a researcher planner here at CRD Regional Parks. And today with me are Emma, and who is the lead of this project. We have Christiana and Kaylin. And this will help us to navigate today's meeting by us being able to introduce you to this project, but also checking the chat and the Q&A as you pose your question or use the chat to give comments. We will start by a really short presentation about the project so that we can all have a common understanding. And Emma, I leave you the floor for that.
Thank you, Beatrice, and welcome everybody. Just going to take a moment to prepare my presentation, share the screen. And we'll get started. So thanks again for joining us today at lunchtime. This is the first in a series of our public information sessions on the Regional Park Strategic Plan update. The presentation will provide an overview first of the current context and the planning framework in which the strategic plan is situated. I'll then speak a little bit about the engagement process for the plan update. And then we'll get into reviewing some of the proposed direction and priorities for the plan update. And then we'll have some time afterwards for the question and answer period. So CRD Regional Parks protects and manages more than 13,000 hectares of natural areas in 32 regional parks and 3 regional trails on southern Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. The Regional Park Strategic Plan from 2012 to 2021 has set the overall vision, goals, and objectives for the Regional Park Service delivery. The CRD board recently initiated an update of the strategic plan and has extended the current plan until this coming July. The last strategic plan set forth a number of strategic priority areas that have guided service delivery over the last 10 years. And I'll just start by giving you a brief highlight of some of those. So one of the priority areas was strengthen the management of existing parks and trails. And one highlight is we've recently completed a sustainable service delivery report card, looking at our assets and the renewal cycles. Plan for an open land banked parks and trails. So recently CRD has opened phase 3 of the ENN Regional Trail, as well as the Sooke Hills Wilderness Park. Strengthen community involvement, education, and partnerships. CRD has recently entered a partnership agreement with the Sooke Bike Club to manage some mountain bike trails in the C2C Regional Park. Promoting the health benefits of trails. Most prominently, CRD does this through our interpretive programs and some of our outreach efforts. And engaging in planning for regional sustainability. This has culminated in the adoption of the Regional Growth Strategy in 2018. The final strategic priority area is prepare for land acquisitions. And the CRD has done this primarily through our land acquisition fund, which has been extended through to 2029. So the current strategic plan establishes a park classification system by park management focus. The system distinguishes the different roles that parks play in achieving the overall purpose of regional parks, which is to provide a range of protected natural environments and opportunities for outdoor experiences and activities. So you'll see the 4 park classifications we have currently are recreation area parks, where we have more intense recreation, such as at Elk Beaver Lake. Natural area parks, such as Mount Work, conservation areas, and our larger wilderness areas. The current strategic plan also establishes a similar classification system for regional trails, where we have bike and pedestrian trails more in the urban core for active transportation, and multiple use trails that serve more as recreational trail corridors in the outlying areas. So this slide provides us an overview of the evolution of the regional park service, showcasing a few milestones that have defined the service to date. So you'll see since 2012, when the last strategic plan was adopted, there's been some documents that the CRD has adopted, such as the Climate Action Strategy, Regional Growth Strategy, that will inform the update of the strategic plan. The current strategic plan identified key challenges facing the regional parks and trails system a decade ago. And while many of the challenges remain similar today, it's important for us to anticipate what emerging opportunities and issues might face the park system going forward, so that we can prepare and respond to these emerging trends. An updated strategic plan will help the CRD set priorities and manage and respond to these complex challenges impacting the regional parks and trail system. A strategic plan guides the organization in consistently making decisions that move us towards our desired future state. And the key components of the strategic plan will include a vision statement, mission statements, values and principles. It'll set the current context and identify priorities and initiatives, and we'll set some targets to help us measure our success. An updated plan will benefit not only staff, the Regional Parks Committee, and the CRD board in making those consistent decisions to advance the vision, but it will also benefit First Nations, partner organizations, stakeholders, and the public in understanding what CRD's priorities are moving forward. So as I touched on previously, since the adoption of the last strategic plan in 2012, the CRD has adopted some other strategic documents that will inform the Regional Park Strategic Plan update. Most notably, these are the Regional Growth Strategy, the CRD's commitment to reconciliation with First Nations peoples, the Climate Action Strategy, and the Regional Transportation Plan. So these related goals and objectives will be incorporated into the Regional Parks Plan update. So this slide is a bit overwhelming, but it's intended to situate our discussion today at the strategic planning level. And it will inform alignment of park management plans to current CRD policies. It'll inform our park regulatory function, as well as our procedural bylaws, operational guidelines, and ultimately our program delivery. So all of these functions of the service will align with the updated strategic plan. So engagement, that's why you're here today. So thank you for being interested in participating in this update. The Regional Parks Committee and the CRD Board are the decision makers, and they've provided early input on setting the direction for the strategic plan update. And the Regional Parks Committee and Board will receive the updated plan in June and July of this year. All First Nations with traditional territory in the region are being invited to participate. And that's being done through invitation letters, meetings, and the CRD is working with a consultant to help support this process. It will be ongoing throughout the spring and into the summer. Key stakeholder groups were selected for involvement in a series of focus groups. These have just wrapped up. They were conducted throughout February with groups in the region representing conservation interests, outdoor recreation interests, and general social community interests. And so now we've just launched our Get Involved webpage, where we have an online survey available for the public. We're offering these information sessions. There's information on the Get Involved site, an opportunity to contact us if you have any follow-up questions or comments going forward. So now I'll move into the proposed material, and this provides some background for you to then go on your own time into the survey and provide your feedback there. So the proposed vision statement was accepted by the CRD board early February, and we've received input from stakeholders on the vision so far. And now we're seeking public feedback on the proposed vision. The CRD board also directed that we put a lens of conservation and protection of biodiversity on all of these priorities and processes. So please keep that overarching lens of conservation and biodiversity in mind as you review all of this material. So the survey questions ask for feedback on the vision, as well as the mission statements. So keeping in mind, this is an update from the last strategic plan. We've attempted to condense the mission statements from the last strategic plan into these 5. And the survey asks for feedback on each specifically. A set of values and principles has been prepared from the current strategic plan, as well as compiled from recent public engagement efforts that CRD Regional Parks has conducted, such as our visitor use surveys and resident surveys, as well as taken from some of the other board initiatives. So the values and principles form the core beliefs and perspectives for future actions and decisions. So the survey asks for your feedback on these proposed values and principles. And through the stakeholder engagement, some additional values have been proposed, such as leadership, partnerships, stewardship, connectivity, education, and accountability. And the survey asks for your feedback on those. So the following key priorities have been prepared for consideration in the strategic plan update. And these are grouped into 4 theme areas. One theme being conservation and recreation, with the priorities of conserving biodiversity, enabling outdoor recreation, working with partners and fostering stewardship. Access and equity, with the priorities of enhancing health and well-being, promoting complete and connected communities, ensuring economic fairness, and applying an accessibility and equity lens. The third theme area is climate action and resiliency. This is where we're looking to align service delivery to take action on climate change, advancing active transportation in the region, again, developing partnerships and managing our natural areas. And the reconciliation priorities are what we are engaging directly with First Nations on, but we are asking for feedback from you in terms of how the CRD could support reconciliation efforts. So the last two slides were summaries of the full set of priority statements that the CRD board put out. And in the survey, these are broken down into individual questions. Again, in the 4 theme areas. The final part of the survey is asking for some information about yourselves so that we can use the results to compare.
And
so that's the summary, and I'll turn it back to Beatrice.
We invite you to use the Q&A or to raise your hand if you have specific questions. All of the material presented today, it's on our Get Involved page, which is a repository for, thank you, Christiana, for, you have it now in your chat, for all of the project that CRD does for engagement, but there is a specific one for the strategic plan where you have the vision, the mission statement, the priority statement, as well as the survey, Q&As, like they're all the material we have produced and there is also a short summary of the engagement we have conducted with stakeholder. We already engaged 41 different stakeholder groups that informed and gave us some extra direction for the strategic plan. I don't know if anyone has a question or would like to add something. You can either use the Q&A tool, the chat, or raise your hand and I can unmute you. Just a reminder, this session is recorded, so if you want, you can also use your video, but we understand also if you prefer to stay anonymous or off video. I see a question. How do we get involved with focus groups? So the focus group section have been finalized. The focus groups session was meant for stakeholder identified across the region and representing broader interests, like, for example, outdoor recreation interests or conservation interests or community interests. So groups like Power to Be or the Southern Island Mountain Biking Association, or, for example, Habitat Acquisition Trust have been invited to participate to focus group. At this point, the way for the public to engage is through the survey online. Any other question or comment? And also something important for you, this is a short year for us from a decision-making standpoint because of fall election, and that's why the consultation has been compressed for the strategic plan between February and June 2022, which has brought us to offer focus group for stakeholder group and engagement to public through a public survey online. Any other question or interest? And I can also follow up with in the stakeholder engagement, you can see like the groups identified for the stakeholder engagement are posted on our February 9th meeting of the regional, of the board. And that's a full list who was approved and vetted by the Regional Parks Committee, who directed us in the first place in December to establish that list. Maybe I have the dates wrong because all of the dates now look alike, March and February and December.
Yeah, so it was late January when the Regional Parks Committee first considered this material and the list of stakeholders, and the CRD board is the decision maker that receives the recommendations from the Parks Committee.
I see another question coming. Has there been any specific focus on getting CRD to work with community groups in regards to trail building and maintenance? I note that traditionally CRD has been extremely resistant to working with local trail building groups.
So at the strategic plan level, there are several of the priorities that involve expanding our partnerships and focus on stewardship with both conservation groups as well as outdoor recreation groups. So that is something that we are seeking feedback on, of whether that should continue to be a priority for the CRD and how we might achieve it, what we might focus on specifically in that regard for partnerships. I will also bring up that the current strategic plan also defines the scope of what compatible outdoor recreation is in parks, and that's also plays into whether or not CRD may entertain a certain type of recreational activity in parks. It has to align with the conservation values and be determined as compatible. So that language is in the current strategic plan and has been kind of brought to light again through our focus group discussions, and will be refined or defined more clearly in the update.
And also, as Christiane is pointing out in the chat, we are having currently agreements with specific groups on trail building opportunities like SIMS and the Souk Bike Club. The strategic plan informs those type of agreements, so recognize having a focus on partnership, which we heard is really important through the stakeholder group, and we have added in the survey as a question if we should put a stronger light on it, is the first piece of then discussing what other documents can be created underneath which we implement such type of work. In our case, we use MOU, but it could be a management plan or other types of documents. Do we have other questions, or do you have a follow-up? Because maybe we have not fully answered your question, but we will be happy to specify more.
And since you have such a small group, if you want to be unmuted and raise your hand, and you can move out of the Q&A function and into a conversation.
Or maybe not.
So we were just talking about partnerships as one opportunity for kind of trail improvements. Some of the dialogue with focus groups about trails has been focused on our operational maintenance and what type of kind of standards and design guidelines we should be looking at for different types of experiences through our different types of parks.
And
We
also
may
other
have
type of
front country experiences versus back country experiences. Where should we be putting our efforts?
And Emma, we have also spoken about other type of partnership. It's not only about trail building, it might be about conservation and doing some invasive species removal or focusing on monitoring species at risk. It could be about providing more opportunities for events under the form of outdoor recreation events like permits to promote events like, for example, I know there at Beaver Lake, there are rowing competitions sometimes or things like that. So we have been talking about how can we improve our work with different stakeholders to improve also what we offer within our regional parks. So that it has touched different important key topics on how to work better across the region with our partners and stakeholders, and also parks agencies like Parks Canada and BC Parks, who are the other players here around to offer outdoor recreation and protected areas.
Sharing information
yes.
Between groups on best practices or current evidence that informs park management.
I see another question coming, Emma, and I will read it to you. CRD recently declined to consider alternative biking classifications to mountain biking, despite recommendation to the contrary. Is there any plan to dealing with alternative biking use? Example, gravel riding, e-bike access, etc. This is an issue that is happening now, whether or not the CRD is willing to accept its existence.
So I'll take a stab at responding, Matt. The strategic plan certainly promotes, or what's proposed in the material is advancing regional active transportation opportunities that contribute to greenhouse gas reduction. So this is really honing in on our regional trail system and recognizing it for clean mobility. So whether that be e-bikes are permitted as long as they're pedal assisted. But it's also focused on providing those connections from communities to parks by walking and cycling. So really to facilitate that, there is a need for trail development for these different modes. So I'll take your point that there's, technology is advancing, that those are kind of some emerging trends, things that CRD does need to respond to as they emerge now and over the next 10 years. So definitely open to feedback on how to respond to those emerging trends.
And something that I think, Matt, we discussed with the stakeholder group, which I think it's goes in that direction, is like we have currently 4 classification of our regional parks for wilderness to outdoor recreation areas. Those different places allow for different uses. And it was pointed out that this is not clear and we need to work a little bit more on the classification as we move forward. But it's also the idea that maybe we can focus on these outdoor recreation areas, which we have only at Beaver Lake right now, to think about these emerging trends and emerging outdoor recreation requests, which it's a huge opportunities because, and we mentioned it quickly, but we have a land acquisition fund, which still allows CRD to buy land. And so the strategic plan update, setting new criteria, will help also define how we do land acquisition. And we are hearing that a new lens has to be offered on how we think about land and outdoor recreation and conservation, both of it, in the coming year. This was what we heard from our stakeholder.
Another element that is added to the survey based on what we heard from stakeholders is an increased focus on accountability and transparency. So whether it be through those decision-making processes or ways to be more responsive to when we engage on developing a management plan, for example, can we be further transparent through the implementation of some of those plans and policies.
And Christiana just put the land acquisition strategy link into our chat. So if you want to look more into that, you have it right now and refer to in our chat. Any other question or follow-up or deepening of the questions?
I will just mention that over the past couple of months, the terms of reference for the Regional Parks Committee has been reviewed, and CRD has now a transportation committee, and the focus of the regional transportation issues, including regional trails, has now been moved to this new transportation committee's terms of reference. So this is a new dynamic. The trails are still managed by the Regional Parks Service, but we have these two different committees now providing guidance for management of parks and trails.
And Emma, we have a new question. So I read it to you. I'm newer to this, and I was just wondering if in this new strategic plan, there are opportunities to acquire new parkland to protect. I'm seeing so much development in my community. So preserving forests and parkland is top of mind right now. I even think of somewhere like Magical Mountain. Thanks.
Great question, Tanya. So yes, the strategic plan will set the overarching values and priorities for all of the program areas that Regional Parks delivers. So the strategic plan will inform the renewal of our land acquisition plan. And that's currently a 2-year plan that focuses more specifically on park acquisition priorities. But the strategic plan will certainly incorporate some goals and targets for park acquisition generally in terms of the types of parks and trails that we're seeking and kind of the purpose of them. So also looking at, so one of the priority areas now under climate action, for example, is strategically acquire and manage natural areas to address climate mitigation, urban containment, and access to green space for a growing population. There may be other biodiversity targets that will inform land acquisition, as well as outdoor recreation gaps or targets that will inform land acquisition. And then there'll be kind of a more focused effort on that actual land acquisition plan in the coming year after the strategic plan is set. Hopefully that sheds a bit of light on your question there, Tanya.
Yes, and just to add on, the land acquisition fund has been renewed last year for another 10 years. So we are still mandated for the next 10 years to go and acquire more land. Might it be to buffer existing parks? Might it be to buy new parks? So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, we are also super happy about it, Tanya. Like we are really happy that the land base for regional parks has the potential to become bigger over the coming 10 years. And maybe there are other questions or other things you would like to understand more or discuss more. As you will see, if you go through the Get Involved page, there will be a survey that really asks you a question about the vision statement, the mission statement, but there is also the opportunity at the end of the survey to add on. We provide a question where it's like, anything else to say, because we know that it might be that there are important topics at heart for you that you want to discuss. So there is also the opportunity to add that type of information in the survey as well. So I can see Mary asking, can CRD help prevent urban sprawl?
So regional parks, I guess, may play a role in urban containment, as well as in developing the concept of complete communities where everyone does, regardless of income or age or ability, have access to green space and access by walking and cycling, and not necessarily a vehicle. So certainly CRD does have a role to play. And we have had a series of interviews and focus groups with other park agencies in the region to determine, so such as municipal parks and provincial parks, to determine what is CRD regional parks' specific role in relation to those other agencies, and what are our overlapping objectives, and how can we work together going forward to address some of our common goals.
And we have, like, CRD has a growth strategy, which has been renewed in 2018. And there are a series of commitments for climate action and urban sprawl and the growth of the region in that document, which will inform how we do the strategic plan as well. And maybe, Emma, you want to give a little bit of an outline of what is expected next, so that if some other question pop up in the meantime, we can say what to expect next after this webinar and public engagement piece.
Absolutely. So the survey is live until April 4th. So definitely please encourage friends and family and colleagues to check out the Get Involved page and provide their input through the survey. We'll have
also enemies. Also,
and your enemies,
and your enemies, everyone.
Or maybe you're part of an organization who may or may not have been part of a focus group with us. Definitely encourage the membership to get involved. We'll have a few more information sessions, and we're available for you if any questions arise during this next month. After the survey closes, we'll be compiling all of the things that we heard from the different park agencies, the different stakeholders, and the public survey input, and going into drafting the plan based on our own staff's input, as well as what we've heard, and keeping in mind it's an update. So some of the material, the current content in the strategic plan will be that we haven't fully developed yet, will be rolled into the new plan, and we expect a new plan to be brought to the Regional Parks Committee in June, and they will provide recommendation to the board in July. And then, as Beatrice mentioned earlier, there'll be a recess of the board for the fall during the municipal elections. And we expect a new board to start back to work implementing the new plan come early 2023.
And we haven't specified, but engagement with First Nation is ongoing, and it's at the government to government level, and so kept separate from this specific piece, but it's ongoing throughout all our engagement sessions. So we are listening for a really large host of different interests about this strategic plan.
So in case you haven't dived into the Get Involved page, one piece on there is a summary of the stakeholder engagement that we've prepared. So just some highlights from that. Feedback about the vision. So we have heard some proposed new concepts to incorporate in to strengthen the vision. So those are the concepts of connectivity, active transportation, and inspiring stewardship and education. So those might trigger some ideas for you there in terms of how you respond to the vision statement that's proposed. Feedback about the mission. Stakeholders suggested that the mission statement could better reflect the dynamic relationship between conservation and compatible outdoor recreation, as well as highlight the function of active transportation and education that the CRT provides. I think I mentioned earlier the additional values and principles that were proposed by stakeholders, such as CRD providing leadership, value in partnerships, connectivity, stewardship, education, and that accountability piece.
And also, if there is no other question and you're all happy with this presentation, we can also close early and give you 50 minutes of your lunch without anyone talking to you. This is also an option. We will use Get Involved also after the engagement closes actively. So if you go on the Get Involved page and you sign up, you will get updates when new material is offered on that page, which might be under the form of a summary of what we heard, or it could be steps that we undertake to further on the plan. So if you want to know where we at, what is happening, that's the best place to stay involved. And there's also the emails that you can connect with if after this meeting you're have a aha moment and said, oh, there was this really incredible question I didn't ask. There's still the way to connect with us.
Maybe you have a completely unrelated question. You're
Yes.
welcome to fire away. We're here for you.
Thank you, Tanya. The awkward silence moment, you know, in a meeting, especially virtually, where you can't escape anywhere. You have been also kind. I normally tell people that if they misbehave, I can get them out of a webinar. Like I gained superpower being a virtual engagement facilitator because I can get people in and out of meetings. So you have been all great. So thank you so much for participating. So do you get your money from taxes? So the question is, do you get your money from taxes?
Great question, Mary. CRD Regional Parks and Trails is mostly funded through tax requisition from all the municipalities across the region and the electoral areas. There's a very small percent of revenue generated from non-taxed sources. These could be through situations where there may be rental house, for example, or rental facility on CRD parkland where there's a low level of revenue generated. Partly through, we offer permits for different events, and there's nominal permit fees. Am I missing any other examples?
We get grants.
We get grants from federal, provincial agencies.
And in the case of the land acquisition, often we partner with others like the Habitat Acquisition Trust or the Nature Conservancy or community groups, and we are able to buy more land thanks to the help of community groups and NGOs and conservation. But most of the service is paid through taxes. And the question is, how do CRD plans and manage impact or get applied to how municipal parks are run? Sorry, I need to reread it. How do CRD's plans and management impact or get applied to how municipal parks are run? There are numerous CRD parks that border onto smaller parks or act as park corridors. Is the reason for the question?
Great question. And yes, Matt, there are many scenarios where there's community or municipal parkland adjacent to regional parkland. And this is really two separate jurisdictions managing their own land as separate agencies or entities, unless there is a formal agreement in place for one of those agencies to manage the other's land. I think there's opportunity to strengthen the relationship between the different agencies, especially where there's connectivity for corridors, as you suggest. And some of our questions in the survey do relate to where CRD should be focusing in that regard.
And we have currently agreements also, not only with municipal park, but also think that many of our parks do border with provincial parks or national parks. And we have agreements, for example, with BC parks, especially around the area of Mount Work, where we work together on common goals and opportunities and challenges. But it's a one-by-one basis based on who wants to partner with whom.
Or there may be a covenant, for example, where I'll continue to use the example of Habitat Acquisition Trust as one of many possible agencies that may have a covenant on part of CRD land, which kind of is an added level of kind of constraints or management objectives for that particular area.
And Mary's asking, and I may be able to respond to that, is a community garden something CRD could be involved with? Not CRD regional parks, but there is CRD environmental protection, who does a lot of work with communities around community garden, around areas of common interest for conservation, like the Gorge Waterway. So not all of the services are provided by the same group. Regional parks mostly focus on the parkland that it's under our legislation and jurisdiction. Environmental protection is the group who does more work around community engagement on this project. And I suggest you go and check their page, because they have a lot of really neat projects with communities across the region.
I'll also add that the CRD regional planning is the planning committee has been looking at the possibility of developing a regional farmland trust, which would sort of be like a land acquisition, but for acquiring farmland in the region. And some regional parks have agricultural land within them. So there's, some may be appropriate to be kind of converted into farmland, while some may be most appropriate to stay within the park function. So it's definitely something at a broader scale that's being explored. But right now, community gardens and farming is outside the scope of what CRD Regional Parks does. CRD is such a large, complex organization. We offer over 200 different services. Some services are to the whole region, so all the municipalities and electoral areas pay into those services, and some services are more localized.
And maybe you have still some really interesting question that you want to ask. And we have like more or less 5 minutes left. So it might be some still burning question also really that are not related to regional parks, but other services we offer. So we are happy to respond to those too.
The CRD Get Involved webpage is a platform that offers participation in other events. So you may want to look there for some other engagement opportunities on Salt Spring Island and the Gulf Islands. There's currently initiatives happening there, and the Juan de Fuca electoral area parks strategic plan is getting renewed at the same time. You can subscribe to get updates on any or all of those engagement processes.
Yes, and once again, you can find in the chat the Get Involved page, which will send you to all of the projects we are currently working on, beyond the one for regional parks. So we have another question. Before COVID, my kids and I did a lot of great CRD programs. Thanks for today too. Oh, thank you. And the programs are again life, Mary. Like we went for a period in which we didn't offer because of COVID, but all of the offers are starting, like they have been ongoing last year, but even more this year as regulation are going down. So the change that we made big is like asking people to register to avoid to have big groups and remain within what was allowed to. But I guess that as we're taking our mask off, maybe we are taking also some of the restriction on group numbers, and hopefully have more of those offered coming this spring, summer, and fall.
Traditionally, we would have done an in-person open house for something like the strategic plan update, but there was too much uncertainty to plan something like that, and maybe our comfort level is not quite there yet either, but hopefully we can host in-person engagement in the near future.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah, we are really so grateful for all of your time and people participating. And we have 2 other webinars upcoming. One next week in the afternoon of the, I will now say the wrong day, of the 16th from 5 to 6. And another, the 1st of April, which is not an April Fools. It happens really, again, from 12 to 1. So if you know other people who are interested, or you're super keener and you want to come again, we will be so happy to have you again and have your voice, because that will really inform how we develop the strategic plan and the values we want to represent as a community over the coming 10 years. So thank you so much for your time and for coming here today with us and listening to the presentation and offering feedback.
We do encourage you to take the survey up until April 4th. So lots of time ahead, but maybe you want to do it right now because it's fresh in your mind.
Are you hinting people to go do the survey, Emma? I see this is propaganda. Jokes apart, thank you so much, and I will stop recording our session now.